Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says the pressing need to adjudicate, not mediate. Let us try and understand what is the author trying to convey. We have the Supreme Court of India. It had delivered judgment in reference to the Shaheen Bagh protest. What was this judgment all about? It said that in case there are protesters, in case there are people who are voicing their grievance against the government, in all these cases, these sections of the people voicing their opinion against the government because of a government bill, because of a government initiative, have every right to protest. Why? Because Article 19 clearly mandates that they have every right to protest in a legitimate manner. So what did the Supreme Court say? The Supreme Court has guaranteed that you, certain section of the people, voicing your opinion against the government, have every right to do so. So right to protest is a fundamental right, which is a legitimate right. But the Supreme Court also looked into the other section of the people as well. Who are these other sections of the people? There are people who go from one place to another. They have to commute as well. They have to move from one region to another. If there are protesters who are blocking the road, the other sections of the people, their rights are getting violated. So what did the Supreme Court say? The Supreme Court said that you, the protesters, have the right to protest. But there are other section of the people who have to move as well. If you block the way, you are violating the rights of certain other sections of the people, and as a result you can express your dissent only in the designated areas, that which is chosen by the administration. Why? Because you have the right to dissent, and at the same time you do not have the right to create nuisance. Why nuisance? Because when you block the road, the other section of the people are not able to travel, move from one place to another, which is creating a nuisance, and as a result you, the protesters, are violating the rights of some other section of the people. And as a result, the Supreme Court went ahead and said, when it comes to the Shaheen Bagh protest, yes, you have every right to protest as enshrined under the Constitution of India, but this means it has to happen only in the designated areas, that which has been chosen by the administration. This was what was laid in the Shaheen Bagh protest judgment. But then, after this particular judgment was delivered, we have about 12 activists who filed a review petition in the Supreme Court of India. They requested the Supreme Court of India to kindly reconsider this particular judgment. This is where the Supreme Court of India has dismissed the review petition. So what did the Supreme Court say? The Supreme Court has said that the right to protest cannot take place anytime and anywhere. It has gone ahead and said that in case there are some protests which are spontaneous in nature, which are instantaneously happening because of a particular issue, that is completely allowed. But if it is for a longer period of time, for an indefinite period of time, occupying the public place, creating a nuisance, affecting the right of some other section of the people, that is not allowed, said the Supreme Court of India in this particular case. In this particular backdrop, we have to understand what are the views of the author. The author in this particular case takes into picture the rights of the protesters and at the same time the performance of the judiciary. What does he speak about the right of the protesters? He says that the protesters do not actually come to the roads. They do not want to block a particular premise just for the sake of it. They're doing it because their grievance is not addressed by the executive or by the government. This is where the author goes on to say that there have been instances, there have been cases where they have been arrested as well. Charges have been framed against them, which is why these people are also the sufferer, says the author. This is where the author brings into another perspective about the performance of the judiciary. Where has the Supreme Court gone wrong? According to the author, he says whenever there is a particular issue, let's say for example the Citizenship Amendment Act, or with respects to the farm bills, or with reference to any issue, the people actually enter into the mode of protest only when the Supreme Court is not able to take that particular case on a timely basis. Had the Supreme Court taken up this particular issue on a timely basis, ensured that there was examination and analysis of this particular issue, and if it had given its judgment on a particular timeline, the so-called protest would not have resulted, because the government did not listen to them, because the Supreme Court did not deliver the judgment on time. That is why the people have entered into the fold of protest, says the author, according to his perspective. Let's say, for example, if we are speaking about the farm bills, ideally the constitutionality of the farm bills was being checked from the initial level. There have been petitions which have also been filed in the Supreme Court of India. Had the Supreme Court taken this particular perspective, delivered the judgment on an assertive basis, in such a scenario, all these protests would not have come up, says the author. So where is the major blunder? The blunder is in the form of judicial apathy and judicial procrastination, and because of not taking this particular case on a timely basis, says the author on the first level. The second major concern is in reference to the mediation. What is it about mediation? Let's say, for example, there is one of the bills that has been passed by the legislature. So what should happen? Whether this particular bill is constitutional or not, if someone has a problem with it, they go to the Supreme Court of India, they file a case in the Supreme Court of India. Ideally, this should be judged by the Supreme Court of India by delivering the judgment. Instead of delivering the judgment by interpreting the laws, what is the Supreme Court doing? It is asking its judges to mediate with number of people. It is asking to speak to number of people. It is requesting the people to enter into the consensus. That is not the job of the judiciary, says the author. Ideally, it should have looked into the law. If it felt that particular legislation is unconstitutional, going ultra vires the constitutional, declare that particular legislation unconstitutional in an assertive manner. That is what is the job role of the judiciary. But in the specific cases, let's say, for example, in CIA, or for example in farm bills, what we have is the judiciary going to the people, speaking to the people, mediating, which was not required, says the author in the second case. So which is what he's saying: the pressing need to abjudicate, give the judgment, pass the judgment in an assertive manner so that it can be complied by the parliament. But in this particular case, since you have started mediating, you have not done justice, or the role of judiciary was not met, says the author. The third important factor is with respect to the abusive judicial review. What do we mean by this abusive judicial review? Let me explain this concept in simple of terms. Courts are generally assumed that they are the last line of defense for all the people. Why? Because there might be different sections like legislature, executive. When no one steps in and takes care of the people, the last resort, the last idea where the people look up to is the judiciary. And who gives this power to the judiciary? It is the Constitution of India. What is the Constitution? It is the supreme law of the land. It is where all the rules, regulations are prescribed. How the state institutions have to work has been prescribed, and this also endures the values and ethos of a particular society. But when it comes to the Constitution, we have what is called as the living tree approach. What is this living tree approach? It is living tree and approach. Any constitution for that matter cannot be stagnant. It has to change. It has to change with changing times. That is why we also have what is called as constitution as organic in approach, which means as the society changes, as the society evolves, the constitution also starts changing as well. But when it comes to the constitution, there are two ways of looking at it. One is where the legislature pictures in. They have every right to bring constitutional amendment as well. So that is what is called as the constitutional amendment. So this is the power that has been given to the legislature. But there is an other way as well. That is through the judicial interpretation. Let's say, for example, back in the 1970s, we did not have something called as the basic structure doctrine. What was this? This was an innovation of the judiciary. So there are two ways of looking at constitutional interpretation. One, where you have the legislature who bring about changes within the constitution by introducing new set of statements or wordings or articles, and at the same time you have the judicial innovation, or you can also have new interpretations when it comes to the Constitution of India. So whenever this particular constitution is amended according to the procedure as given by the constitution and it is complying by all the rules and regulations and procedurally it is upright, but it is not good on the substantive side, that is what is called as unconstitutional constitutional amendment doctrine. What do we mean by it? Let me give you an example. Let's say for example there is a prescribed path in the constitution for the amendment. Let's say two-third majority or whatever the majority special majority that we have. So the constitution has given this particular parameter. It has given the procedure that if constitution has to be changed, what we require is a special majority, and in few scenarios about 50% of the consideration of the state is also required. So we have the legislature who bring the constitutional amendment. They have made sure that all the procedures that are given are followed as well. But when it comes to this particular procedure, there is what is called as constitutionalism. There is also what is called a spirit behind the constitution as well. If it is right or wrong, if it is meeting the values of the constitution, will be checked on the substantive side by the judiciary of India. In certain cases, if it is violating certain sections of the constitution, the ethos and values of the constitution, it can be declared unconstitutional as well. So what do we have to understand here? The basic parameter is that yes, the legislature have every right to bring an amendment, but the judiciary can also drop this particular legislation, call this particular amendment unconstitutional as well. So the abusive judicial review currently goes on to say that in case there is the legislature who have passed an amendment and the judiciary using its judicial power has not struck down what is called as a particular amendment which is going against the values, the ethos and fundamentals of the constitution, that is what is called as abusive judicial review. Ideally they should have struck it down. Ideally they should have told that this is unconstitutional, but in certain cases where the judiciary is not acting as the right umpire, calling this particular process unconstitutional, it is meant that this is called as abusive judicial review. So what is this abusive judicial review? When courts sometimes play in advancing what is called as the anti-democratic projects of the legislature without even striking them down, that is called as the abusive judicial review. So the umpire of democracy, which happens to be the judiciary, aids the executive in fulfilling certain strategies. So what we have is the executive's idea is fulfilled by the judiciary, which gives more legitimacy to that particular legislation, is what is called as abusive judicial review. So the author in this particular case says there have been instances where laws have been passed and the Supreme Court has not called it unconstitutional, which means that the judiciary is not able to deliver the justice according to the author. Further, the author brings into picture what is called as the judicial precedents. He takes the example of one of the landmark judgment that happened in 1972 and 3 about Himat Lal Kesha versus the Commissioner of Police. According to this landmark judgment delivered by the Supreme Court of India, it said that freedom of assembly is an essential element of a democratic system. In spite of looking into this particular Supreme Court case, the Supreme Court in Shaheen Bagh protest has not given this particular perspective, says the author. And as a result, what is the way forward? How do we sort out such issues? The author in this case says that in case of radicalization, in case of protest, in case the grievances are not addressed, what we require is a fair litigative means where all the parties are given a fair hearing and justice is delivered as soon as possible. Why? Because justice delayed is justice denied. So make sure that all the parties are heard and judgment of this particular issue is given as soon as possible. And at the same time, the author brings into perspective what is called as the public inquiry system. This is one of the models that is followed in the United Kingdom. What is it? In case the government senses that there are protests, radicalization that is taking place, what are the grievances of these people will have to be sorted out by the government, and all their issues will have to be integrated with that particular scheme or the program or the bill, says this particular public inquiry system. So you are inquiring with the protesters, you have their grievances, sort it out with them, and whatever the grievances are, embed with the actual program, says the author. In case we are able to have the fair litigative means and the public inquiry system, we should be in a position to sort out the issues, says the author in this particular case. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says, make peace with nature now. The article here is speaking about climate change and its issues and how we have to overcome this particular issue. When COVID-19 struck us all, we were all toppled. We had a lot of issues with respect to the COVID-19, and the world came together to make sure that this COVID-19 is completely eliminated. We have the government stepping up its apparatus. We have the private organizations gelling together. We also have the civil society which was able to contribute to its success as well. How did it happen? It happened because everyone was part of this particular process, and as a result we have number of vaccines that have been developed, and we also have administration of these vaccines that is happening. The author here says that COVID-19 is just a sample, it is just a trailer, but the movie is yet to come. What is he saying to say? He is saying that the greater problem is in reference to the climate change, the nature loss, and the pollution of air, soil, and water. The author says that COVID-19 has created a lot of problems to the people, but greater problems in the next 1 century will be in terms of consequences that the human race will face because of the climate change, because of the devastation to the nature, and we are polluting the air, soil, and water. In this particular backdrop, the author goes on to say the scientific community in the number of years has given enough statistics and evidence and has proved that climate change is happening over a period of time. But the human society, the political organizations, in fact, the private lobbying groups is not ready to listen to it. And as a result, the government, the financial institutions, the businesses and individuals are not able to protect the planet Earth, and as a result what we are going to sense is a greater misery down the lane. In the year 2020, we have the United Environmental Program which had announced that there is a dip when it comes to the greenhouse emissions. But this particular dip is not enough, as the world is still headed for the global warming of more than 3 degrees centigrade in this particular century, says the author. In order to overcome this particular issue, in order to have a sustainable future, there are some steps that we have to take, and that has been expressed in one of the reports given by the United Nations, which happens to be Making Peace with the Nature report. What does this report currently say? The author in this particular case goes on to say that this particular report has given an idea as to how we can overcome the issues of climate change. What is it? First, what is this report all about? This report brings in an evidence about the environmental decline by considering different reports. What do we mean by it? Let's say, for example, United States of America has a climate organization and a ministry. United Kingdom has a particular ministry. India has a ministry of environment. So is China, and there are different organizations as well who are working for the cause of reducing the impact of climate change. All these scientific bodies have what is called as statistical evidences. They also have proven evidence that there has been degradation of the environment. So what is this Making Peace with Nature does is it collects all these important information of different organizations, of different ministries across the world, and it provides the evidence of the impact of climate change, and ultimately it also provides suggestions, ideas how we can reverse this particular process. Therefore, this Making Peace with Nature report has given us a blueprint for the sustainable future. It is basically looking at environment, social and economic challenges as an integrated approach. We cannot view environment as a separate in isolation. We cannot have the society in isolation or the economics in isolation. If we are impacting the environment, this will indirectly harm the society and its people. It will also harm the economic economics on the larger run, says this article. In order to overcome this particular issue, in order to have a sustainable future, the article clearly goes on to mandate that there are what is called as the nationally determined contributions which each of the countries have promised. These are the obligations that countries have said that we will take care on the voluntary basis. For example, when it comes to India, India has promised there will be more increasing number of renewable energy sectors. The promise when it comes to decreasing the coal sector, increasing solar and wind energy, these are the nationally determined contributions. Likewise, other countries have also said so. So they have to keep up to this particular promise and the obligations have to be met, says this article. The second is we have to conduct the global carbon trading market. Third, the developed countries had promised that they would be providing about 100 billion for the global community. As of now, it is not in movement, so this has to be restarted, and the developed countries will have to provide technology and money to the developing country, says the third argument. And finally, as a way forward, what we require is the circular economic systems. What are these circular economic systems? Basically, when it comes to the economics, what we currently believe in is use and throwing it. But the author suggests what is called as the circular economics, where we have to reduce the emissions, we have to reuse the resources, so waste generation should be taken up, and the way forward is the circular economic model. Apart from this, it is not the responsibility of the government alone, it is for the whole of the society to pitch in. Yes, the government will have to take the initial steps, it has to pump in the money, but it is also the civil society, the individuals, the private organizations, all will have to step up, and this is where we would be able to control the impact of climate change, says the author. And finally, citizens' voice should also be taken for the far-reaching decisions, says the author. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says polluted air killed 54,000 in Delhi. There was one of the reports that was released, or an analysis conducted by Greenpeace Southeast Asia. According to its analysis, air pollution in Delhi has claimed about 54,000 lives in the year of 2020, says this particular report. Apart from Delhi, it had also considered 6 important cities in India. Let's take the example of Mumbai. 25,000 people have lost their lives. In Bengaluru, 12,000 people have lost their lives. In Hyderabad, 11,000 people have lost their lives. Chennai, 11,000, and Lucknow, 6,700 people have lost their lives because of pollution. So when we are speaking about the air pollutant levels explicitly in reference to Delhi, Delhi has remained one of the most pollutant cities, and its pollution levels are 6 times above the prescribed World Health Organization limit. Such has been the issue when it comes to Delhi, says this Greenpeace analysis, and as a result, it has given some recommendations for us to follow in the near future. So it says that the need of the hour is to increase and scale up the renewable energy, bring an end to fossil fuel emissions, and at the same time boost the transport system in India. As of now, most of the people use their private vehicles, and this has to be reduced. So what we require is the government initiative to increase the public transport, says the Greenpeace initiative. And at the same time, governments, corporations, and individuals must do more to eliminate the sources of air pollution and make our cities a safer place and a healthier place, says the Greenpeace initiative. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into another article which is important from the preliminary examination point of view. This article says Hyderabad wins global tree city status. When we look into the context, it says that Hyderabad has won a green contest among cities in India and emerged one of the tree cities of the world. The title has been bestowed by the Arbor Day Foundation and the Food and Agricultural Organization. What was the criteria that this particular city had to meet? There were about 5 metrics. What are those? First is what is called as establishing responsibility. Second is what is called as setting the rules. So what is this setting the rules? First, we require a written consent by the leaders of that particular city. Second, what we require is the law or an official policy, that which has been given by the government of that particular city. Third is what is called as know what you have. This is where we require a repository or an inventory to keep an update of the number of trees that are present in that particular city. Fourth is the allocate the resources. This is about money that has been sanctioned by the government in that particular city. And fifth is to celebrate the achievements. So basically, annual celebration of the trees to raise awareness in that particular society is also taken up by the people. In case a particular city is able to meet all these five parameters, that city will be called what is called as the tree city. So from India, it is Hyderabad which has been given this particular designation, and apart from this, there are other countries which had also participated, but from India, it was only Hyderabad which has been given this designation, says this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says center correcting historical mistakes of neglecting Assam. So basically, what are we speaking about? We are speaking about one of the projects called as Mahabahu Brahmaputra. What is this project all about? The Mahabahu Brahmaputra project is aimed at providing seamless connectivity to the eastern parts of India, and it also includes various developmental activities that which has been taken care by the government of India for the people living in the Brahmaputra and the regions of Barak. So all those people for whom developmental activities are taken in the eastern part of India, in the regions around Brahmaputra and Barak, is what is called as the Mahabahu Brahmaputra. In order to make sure that this particular idea of development is taken into picture, they have inaugurated what is called as the RoPax vessel operations between Nimati and Majuli Island, North Guwahati and South Guwahati, and Dhubri and Hastingmiri. So what is this RoPax vessel? Basically, when it comes to the shipments, there are two types of ships. One is what is called as RoRo ship. The other is what is called as RoPax vessel. What is this RoRo ship? Let's say, for example, if we have to carry cargo such as cars or truck from one place to another, that is what is called as ro-ro shipment. But when you have to carry, let's say, the cargo like cars or trucks, and you also carry the passengers, that is what is called as RoPax. The Prime Minister has also launched two portals when it comes to ease of doing business. The first is what is called as the Cardi portal, which will collect the cargo and cruise data on a real-time basis. Then we also have what is called as PANI, which stands for Portal for Asset and Navigation Information, which will act as a one-stop solution for providing information about river navigation and the infrastructure. Both these portals were also done because they wanted to improvise on the ease of doing business. And apart from this, what is the significance of this particular project of Mahabahu Brahmaputra? The RoPax services will help in reducing the travel time by providing the connectivity between different banks. As of now, they have to travel via the road, which means it will take a lot of time, and at the same time it will also increase the cost as well. But with the RoPax vessel in picture, this will ultimately save on the time as well as on the cost front. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the practice questions. A growing unease is being felt and expressed about the accountability of the judiciary. Explain the statement with relevant examples. Countries have performed poorly to keep global average temperature rise to under 2 degrees centigrade. Do you think climate change risk management has fallen victim to bad science and damaging politics? Justify. So please write all your answers on the comment section, peer review, and also give some positive feedback. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.